What's going on, my friends? We wanted to talk about the most recent outcome with the National Association of Realtors lawsuit in reference to co-op and commissions. What exists right now is, as a buyer, if you want to go and check out a property, and let's say you're like, hey, I found this property, Mr. Buyer's Agent, and I want to go check it out. They're like, yeah, no problem. And they're like, well, how do you get paid? Well, how they get paid right now at the moment is pretty simple. So for them, the commission that gets paid to the buyer's agent, your agent as a buyer, all comes from the seller. So the seller pays not only for the listing agent's commission, but also for your buyer's agent commission as well. So on the high side, it's 6%. It's usually split 50-50, 3% to the listing agent, 3% to the buyer's agent. Now, it's not always that way, and sometimes it's 3 and 2 at a total of 5, and sometimes it's 2.5 and 2.5. But the point is here is that the commission has inherently, for so many years, has been paid by the seller. Now, how does this impact you as a buyer looking to buy a property? And when does this go into effect? By the way, the lawsuit that's been settled that NAR has to pay over a 5-year period is $418 million. Now, I can get into all the logistics as to why the lawsuit came into effect and how it was unfair and the yada yadas, but it doesn't really matter to you as a buyer because it's all history. And as one of my sons like to say, it's like, why do we care about history? Because it happened already and we can just learn from it and move on. There's argument against that. I get it. So when does this go into effect? This, in theory, is supposed to be going into effect as of July this year, 2024. So previously, if you as a buyer were going to look at the property and your agent goes and looks at that property online, which they would find on MLS, multiple listings. And in MLS, it's going to indicate how much commission is to be paid to your buyer's agent. Okay, so it could say 2.5, it could say 3%, it could say 2%, which is in certain parts of the greater Sacramento area has been more prominent to be closer to 2% as of late. That can no longer exist. A seller cannot negotiate a listing contract and co-op with their agent and also the buyer's agent. Okay, so that's where the big change is. The listing agent can still get paid based off of the proceeds from the house, should there be proceeds, and if not, they still have to figure out how to pay, right? Because otherwise, why would the agent list the property? Out of just good graces, maybe, but probably not. Yeah, people are good people and they still like to work, but they want to get paid at the end of the day. Otherwise, why do you have a career at all, right? You still have to put food on your table. You still have to take care of your family. You still have to put your kids through college. You still have to buy new cars. So with that, we can't work for free. Now, when I say we, I mean the realtors that are in the United States that have followed this rule for many, many years, right? It's just been inherent. Oh, it's 6%. I'm going to list my house and I have to pay 6% of commission. So if I list my house for $1 million and I pay 6% right out of the gate, I'm losing what? $60,000, right? $30,000 to each side. So the seller has already been predetermined or kind of just prepared for that going into it. Now they know that they're not going to have to pay as much. So the question now will be, are they willing to be able to provide a seller credit, a workaround, if you will, to the buyer on behalf of the commission that they have to pay their agent or your agent? So let's talk about some of the negatives. As a buyer, how uncomfortable would it be to ask your agent, Mr. Joe, buyer's agent, that's showing you property, if they come out and said, hey, I have to figure out how I'm going to get paid. So yeah, I'm happy to show you some properties. I'm happy to negotiate with you or for you. I'm happy to get into escrow and manage the escrow from start to finish and order inspections and follow up with the mortgage lender to make sure that all that's getting done, to make sure that the timelines are being met so that your contingencies are met, to do all of the particular things that that agent does. But now They have to have the conversation with you and ask you as a buyer, do you have extra money to be able to pay for my commission? How awkward is that? So the whole shift of this industry is going to change dramatically. My expectation and thought is that a lot of these agents are going to kind of go bye-bye. If you look at 2023, how many agents renewed their license in the United States compared to 2024, it is dramatic as to how many people we've lost. It's over 80% in the overall people that had licenses. Now, some of these people that had licenses may have only closed one transaction for the last 12 months or zero. So why would they be paying to update their license when they didn't even make enough money to cover the license cost? It's going to be awkward to have this conversation, but the agent's going to have it, because if you're looking at 5 different properties, some of those properties may offer a seller credit to help cover your buyer's agent's commission, and some may not. So you as a buyer may have to pay that commission. Now, more often than not, especially if you're a first-time home buyer, a lot of the questions that come up are there first-time home buyer programs to help with down payment? Are there first-time home buyer programs to help with closing costs? And now we have to have the discussion of, are there first-time home buyer programs to help cover your agent's commission? It's crazy. So as a buyer, in theory, you think the cost is less. It's actually more expensive. So thinking that through, that's something to kind of process. The other question is you as a buyer may not even know what your agent was getting paid before. And so how do you know what your agent is worth if you haven't really worked with them too much, other than maybe to go and look at a property or two? You don't know what their finesse is in the negotiations and how long they've been doing it, but you may not know how good they are at it. And how do you determine their worth, right? So if 3% was expected and you're looking at a $500,000 house, are they worth $15,000? And do you have the funds to be able to give that money? And if not, your agent has to negotiate with the seller and the listing agent on your behalf to be able to make sure that they get paid. And they may not. They may say, we don't want to offer it. And then it gets really sticky in figuring out how to make sure that that agent gets paid. So with that, I think that more people that are buyer's agents now are going to shift to work in the listing side more than they have ever in history. One of the other things that is not great is this. If there are 10 houses that you're interested in that are listed on the market, whether you're looking at Redfin or your agent sending you drip emails with new properties that are coming about, you see 10 properties that you're interested in. If some of those listings have a notation in them in the MLS that states that the seller is willing to help provide a seller credit to you as a buyer to then turn around and give that money to your agent to help cover their fee, they may steer you to those properties so that they can ensure that they get paid. So let's say 50% of those houses, 5 of the 10 houses are offering a seller credit to be able to help cover that for you. You may only see 5 of the 10 properties. Will an agent limit what properties they take you to based off of what they can make to ensure that they are paid? The answer to that question is probably yes. Otherwise, they got to ask you as a buyer to help cover the commission that they need to make. So this is going to get really sticky, friends, before it gets better. So while we may think that the lawsuit was great and the outcome is great, the repercussions that we're going to see going forward are going to be pretty dramatic. So with that, we just want to make sure that we provide continued education on how this is going, continued education as to how to negotiate with your agent, and make sure you have these conversations with your agent out of the gate. So that way you know how they are getting paid. And if an agent is not having that conversation with you, they need to have that conversation with you. It may be a little bit tough, but unfortunately, it is going to be the name of the game moving forward. We just wanted to touch on this a little bit because it is going to be a big shift. One other thing I didn't mention is that it will likely change underwriting guidelines as we move forward. And why is that? Because underwriting states that if a seller is to provide a credit, depending upon the type of loan you're looking at, conventional, FHA, VA, etc. So agency, conventional guidelines, unless you put 10% down or more, the max seller credit is 3%. So if you need credit to help cover closing costs and now credit to help cover commissions, there may not be enough if you as a buyer are only putting 5% down. If you're a buyer that has 10% down and looking at conventional, then the seller can give 6%. That's the rule as it sits right now. The max seller credit on any government loan for the most part is 6%. So that's different. If you're putting less than 10% down, you can get as much as 6% from the seller to help cover buyers' costs, be it a seller buy down, closing cost, and now your buyer's commission. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys soon. This is Josh with the Mottashed Lending Group. Take care.